All right, it's been a couple of days. We had a few days of rain, then we had some doctor's appointments, and then I had something scheduled the other day. So, first day that I get to come back out here, and cobwebs are everywhere. So, little bastards are just making a mess. But as you can see, the sun is shining. So, we're going to take the bumper back off. I'm going to lower the pins so that they're below the body line, and then I'll do it on both sides, get the pins down where they need to be. That way when I go to put the bumper over, I can line it up and then give it a little push to make my marks. I'm going to use some petroleum jelly on the tips to leave marks on the backside of the fender, and that's what I saw in the KTM tuners video. That's looked like a pretty easy way to do that. So I'm going to mask off this with some blue painter's tape just so it doesn't get scratched. I got me a cargo blanket there, moving blanket, whatever you want to call it. I'm going to lay that there on the ground. Since I cleaned up all my tools, I can do that, get the bumper set up and get that. So first thing I'm going to do is take the bumper back off, lay it on the blanket so I can get everything sorted, and that way I can put the pins in on the other side because they're not in. That's why it sets nice and over here. But I do have to kind of support the front end because with my front end cut out like it is, it does droop. So I will put a bungee cord here, probably hook that up to the roof, or to the hood latch. That'll give it some support so it hangs out in the right place before I do that. So let me get my garage opened up, get the blanket laid out. I'll take these two bolts that I set in here, one on this side, one on that side, out. That way I can pop the bumper back off. I gotta pull my lines back out. Because it rained, I put these caps back over my cooler. I didn't want any water to get down in there. So all right, that's where we're at. I'm gonna get moving. Okay, so I have the driver's side pins in. They are below the body, so I'm gonna have to push the fender in just a little bit. That way while I'm moving around, I don't accidentally rub on them. But when I put the buttons on, they still do come a little bit low. It's just under 1 inch from the plate to the top of the pin. So I'm going to go ahead and do the other side real quick. That hole I drilled here, if we can see it, you can see that that post goes right through the hole, and that works out really well. And I'm going to do the same thing. I got to drill the other side out. I hadn't done that yet either. So I'm going to go over there, do that side. Then I'm going to put the bumper on, get it more or less in place, get the bungee cord on, and then I will pull back the edge, and I will put some dabs of petroleum jelly on here, touch it, and then it'll leave marks on the inside of the fender or on the bumper, and that's where I will drill out my holes. I'm going to use a stepper bit. That way I get the exact hole fitment for this guy, because I don't know exactly what size it is. So I'm just going to use my stepper bit and do it a little bit at a time and get that worked out. So next is the passenger side. All right, so that's what I did. Drilled through just like that. That way the pin has a place to go. All right, now I'll get that pin back in. I already got this one down to the height that it's going to stay at, or at least for the fitting. It may stay there, it may not. Once I put the buttons in the bumper, I'll have to adjust them just to make sure that they're right. But all right, so pull the drill back out, we'll put that pin in there. All right, so the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to wipe off the area where I'm hoping to drill my hole. That way the petroleum jelly will have a nice clean surface to stick to, make a nice clean dot. And the inside of my front bumper cover is a little dirty anyway, so wipe those two areas down real quick, and then we'll get it mounted back up. I changed my mind on the bungee cord. I'm going to use a ratchet strap that I just hook to the top of the fender. That'll give it a lot more support, and that way it won't flex while I'm moving things around like the bungee cord would. So okay, little cleaning, and then next we'll have the bumper front on temporarily. The other thing is, I have some of these acrylic paint pins I use for marking stuff up and dropping on the ground. So I might try to dab the end of the bolt with that, because it does leave a nice wet piece of paint, and maybe that will show up better on the black plastic. I don't know. We'll see. But yeah, I use these for whenever I cut something on metal that is a dark color and the black Sharpie doesn't show up. These work really well for that. So maybe we'll try that and buy a whole pack of these for, I think there's 12 in a pack. Got them off Amazon. I think they're like, I know they're less than 10 bucks. And I still have like 8 I haven't opened, so they last a really long time. Good for marking stuff around the house, but we'll try that too to see how it marks. Well, that was interesting. Okay, so I was putting the bumper back up, and one of these things fell on the ground, and it looks like it used to be bolted to the headlight. You might be able to see that clear plastic there and those screws, but I guess it holds this underpiece here. I always thought this one side sagged a little bit anyway. Apparently they were broke off. I never noticed that. So yeah, it's a good thing I use those tie bar supports to hold up my front end. So the strap's on, it's holding up the front end about where I want it. And we're gonna get ready to mark those. I think I'm gonna try the paint pen first and see if that works better. All right, so right now this is just me sliding it back in place. I had to lower the pins even more, so I'm at the top of the threads on both of them to get the clearance that I wanted. So basically I'm gonna put that up there like that. That's where it's gonna sit, and then once I mark them, I'll be able to push down and that should mark both of them. But I need both hands to do that, so we're gonna do that next. Might be hard to tell, but I just put a dab of white paint on each of those, and you probably use fingernail polish or even regular paint if you had just a dab. You just want to make a mark. So let's see how this works out. All right, it might be hard to tell, but they work pretty good until I slip the bumper, but I can tell where I put the mark. So once I pull the bumper off, we'll see what the marks look like. Might have to do it again, but I think they look okay to center the holes. So the same thing on the driver's side. I'm going to have to lower those pins all the way to the top of the threads. So that's probably where they're going to end up being, because those buttons sit kind of low, so we'll see. But I'm going to go ahead and get those pins lowered down, and then we'll get them marked, and then we'll see how this turns out. All right, that side worked a lot better. Once I get this off, I'll show you. But we'll go ahead and pop this out of here, and then I'll get my stepper bit and we'll start making holes. All right, so let's look. Okay, you can see my 2 dots. They're pretty clear. You can actually see exactly. That's the passenger side. That was the first side I did where it slipped. I could have cleaned them off, but I wanted to make sure. But the driver's side, definitely perfect. Worked. So yeah, the trick is when after you apply pressure, you need to make sure you pull up, and the bumper slipped on the passenger side, but no big deal. But yeah, so these 2 little things here, they go right here on the front of the bumper, and then they connect to the bottom of your headlight. I don't know if you can see that hole and that hole. And that's where they're supposed to plug into, but apparently mine have been broke. I never noticed that before when I had the bumper off the last time. But I always noticed that it sagged more on the passenger side. But like I said, that was before I even did all this work on the front end. So, and I used those turnbuckles to hold the front end up. So it didn't really matter to me because the front bumper is actually holding that in place. So something to watch out for when you're pulling those off. You don't want to break them because they literally are just held in with a few threads and those little screws, but you got to kind of get those off before you destroy it, I guess. Like I said, mine came the first time I took it off. I took the bolts out and the whole thing just dropped on the ground. So I guess mine were broke for a while. Probably the previous owner hit a couple of curbs, because I noticed that the bottom lip is all scratched up. It probably broke them back then, and that might be an issue. But so next thing is, I got my stepper bit out. We're gonna get one of the buttons, and we're gonna, as we go, we're just gonna place the buttons and then make sure they fit nice and tight. All right, so the other day when I cleaned up, I put the buttons, the other two buttons, someplace. I assumed I had put them in these boxes, but now I'm looking for the buttons. All right, so give me a second to track down stuff. This is why I hate putting things away when I'm in the middle of a project. I lose things. All right, so I have a box there that is parts. I have these two boxes here and the stuff laying on top of my bench over here with tools in it, but I'm pretty sure I went through that whole bucket and took all the parts out and all the screws out and dumped them other places, so that they were not in, no parts were in that, that shit was just tools. And if I can't find them, I guess I can just use these two to test fit all the holes and then order up another set. They got to be laying here somewhere. The only other thing I could have done is thrown them in my garbage when I gathered up all the plastic bags. So they could be in the bottom of that box with all the trash. So I'll look there too, because, you know, I've done that as well. Yeah. All right. So let me hunt this stuff down and then I'll get these holes drilled. All right. So I did put them in the bucket where the parts went. They were just laying upside down under something. So once I found them, we're good to go. All right. So I'm going to figure out how I'm going to get down here on the ground and get these drilled out. You know, the other day it was nice, it was cool, and now we're heading back into the 90s. I don't like working when it's hot. All right, so I put a pilot hole in on each side. Then I'll make the stepper bit go in a little easier. And then we'll just go down a little bit at each time until I get a good fitment. All right, regretfully, I can't read what size the steps are, but on this particular large stepper, it is the third from the biggest one, and that allows you to thread that in. It's very tight. It's a nice fit. So once I get them in, I'll put a little dab of Loctite on it and keep that nut from backing off, but that will be nice and tight. Now I'm going to do the upper one and then go over and do the other side. Okay, so I got the bumper back on, got the holes drilled. I had my phone laying here on this thing and it overheated. So going back to where I think this car had bumped into a few things. So right here you'll see this gap. There's a screw, that's a screw mounting point. That screw's broke off. So I always thought this side hung low, like I said. So right now we are supporting the bottom with a bungee cord to help support the top, but that I think was the cause of everything, this side being broke, I guess. But I got the driver's side, looks really good. It's lined up. So now I'm gonna pop the bumper off the pins. I'm gonna tighten the posts down. They feel like they're in a good spot. I'm gonna put some blue Loctite on it. I already popped it off this side. I have a bit of a gap on this side, and because I didn't realize that was sagging right there, I think that's what caused it. But that white paint pen was perfect. Just use a small bit, take it slow so it doesn't walk, get that center punched out, and your holes should line up. So once I get this Loctited up and I get this side buttoned up, I'll show another picture of it all done. All right, so this is the passenger side. It lines up good down here, but as you can see, because of that gap, I guess it caused that. But it does work, so that's pretty good. This one is a little fiddly. I'm gonna do the driver's side next. It lined up really nice. So you may have to make a couple adjustments once you get it on, but yeah, it's now the fender is nice. It's in the right spot, so it's not too low, not too high. And then when I put those supports back in there, that'll pull the front end back up. So, all right, on to the next side. All right, so you can see the driver's side looks a lot better. It lines up better, and it's still hanging low, but when I push on the bottom corner and it lines up, everything's sorted. So I'm going to go ahead and pop these off, tighten up the two studs, put some Loctite on those, and then call this little part of the project done. And then I can start working on routing the oil lines through the front end, get the filter on, see about getting some oil in it, and then I want to test start it. I've already got coolant in it. I'm going to check the coolant level here also, but I'm going to go ahead and get these lines purged out. So the next part will be getting the lines run, put a filter on it, purge all the air out of the lines and the cooler, get those all buttoned up, and then we'll see about a test start. All right, so Loctite's in, buttons work good, nice and easy. Pop, pop, and off it comes. Right back on. Oops, there it goes. All right, so now I'm going to check the coolant and then start working on the oil. I'm going to take a little break. It's getting a little warm. So I'll come back in a little bit after I've had a few drinks of tea, and we'll get that all the oil stuff started.